Hi and welcome to Boston Media Theory. I'm Marcus Breen, and this is a program where we talk to people who live in and are passing through Boston, who may be academics, researchers, consultants, activists, writers, pretty much anybody who's engaged in the communication activities and who has a experience or experiences related to the field. So this can be pretty broad, of course. And today I'm delighted to have Hani Murad here with us. Welcome, Hani.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. And Hani is here because, as he'll tell us, he has direct experience of Palestine and the Palestinian experience as it is being played out early in 2024. I think it's fair to say a tragic experience for the Palestinian people, but we'll get to talk about that as we move forward in the next few minutes. The current devastation of Gaza is something that occupies much of our media space. The treatment of Palestinian people certainly occupies a significant amount of our mental attention, if you like. In early March, we've got 32,000 deaths, mostly civilians in the area known as Gaza. 1/3 of those people, or about 5% of the total population of Palestinians in that area, have been killed, and 1/3 of those people killed are women and children. Innocence by any other name, and a difficult topic for us to discuss today, undoubtedly. So I want to ask, in a quite unusual manner, Hani, if you don't mind, the first question, and that is, given your life and experience, maybe we'll get to that, we'll back up to that in a minute. What's the most important thing on your mind right now?
Well, thank you for having me, and certainly it has been a really difficult time for many of us, Palestinian and other human beings. I'm certainly Jewish, Christian, and other ethnicities, certainly, because when you see human suffering, it's not easy. And the bottom line is that if we can stop the suffering, we should. So what's on my mind now in this moment is that really to stop the carnage, and really unbelievable numbers that you just mentioned of people, innocent people, being killed with no reason except that they are born to a certain ethnic group and they happen to live in a certain area. So yeah, the immediate ceasefire certainly, and hopefully it's permanent. And we also need to look for what's next, because what we have been doing for the past 75 years has not worked.
Correct. Now, you obviously, I think I can say obviously, I'm suspicious of that word, but you obviously speak with an accent like me, not a native-born Bostonian, as it were. So what can you tell us about your experience of where you were born and your perhaps life perspective as a result of your birth and upbringing? Where were you born and that sort of thing?
Thank you. Well, my family comes from Galilee, and I was born in Galilee. I was born in Nazareth, actually, but my village is a little bit north of Nazareth, and I grew up there until my early adulthood. Certainly I'm of a Palestinian descent and heritage, but certainly I am also a resident or citizen of the State of Israel. Growing up over there has been really quite an experience, to say the least, in terms of looking at kind of issues of identity and belonging, and the representation of the state versus what we as a Palestinian community inside Israel feel like and what we aspire for, and the kind of daily treatment of the system as a whole, the structures, the institutions, where we feel as strangers in our own land.
I visited Israel and Palestine in 1976, a long time ago. And one of the images that stayed with me is walking through, or travelling through, I should say, parts of the West Bank and seeing Palestinian men playing backgammon and talking, but the difference between their experience of very quiet life, partly because they were just captives, as it were, and apart from what seemed to be some farming, not much else was happening, and then going into the state of Israel and how busy and active that was, and the totally different rhythms of life about being, you know, one kind of person, that is a homeless in your own home, as it were, and then the others who have made it their home. Seemed profound to me at the time, and it's an image of sort of movement and energy that stayed with me a long time.
Yeah, it's really a contrast between, and I think things have changed with time, but you know, growing up, you know, the rhythm of life and the pace of life is very different. Certainly, overall, the Jewish community inside Israel is more kind of Western leaning as far as culture, and you know, we have a lot of immigrants who came from Europe earlier, and because of, you know, the Nazi Holocaust and the anti-Semitism in Europe, and you know, the aspiration of the Jewish people to have a homeland, which is fine. I'm not against that, for them to have homeland. For Jewish people, they need to be protected and safe like anybody else. But I might disagree with, you know, kind of taking over and having a state where the whole flavor is one of, you know, being in charge and marginalizing the local population.
How did you feel growing up in that sort of situation? Did you have this sort of sense of always being in that marginal space and removed from the opportunities that were available to other people?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, if you look at, you know, the ingredients or the important things to hold the society together, you know, you have culture and language, and you know, some people religious, some people may not, but there is national aspiration that you feel as a group. And for us, Palestinians inside Israel, our national aspiration is to be part of the Palestinian community widely. And the first thing I noticed was that we are called Israeli Arabs, which is kind of, you know, a label that I question, because, you know, we have, you know, relatives who are Palestinians from in other countries or other places, and why are they Palestinian, where are Israeli Arabs? Kind of, when I was young, it just like felt weird or kind of strange to me. But certainly that was certainly a policy of fragmenting the Palestinian society as a whole. And you know, growing up, certainly you face discrimination. You see it on a daily basis. You know, the place where you live, like your village, your neighborhood, your town, your schools, your clinics, they are not at the same funding level from the states as you know, in the Jewish towns. As a matter of fact, my village did not have electricity until 1976. That's the year you visited.
Yes.
You visited. And we didn't have actually a paved road to connect us to the major highway. It wasn't a huge highway like here, but like major road to go to Nazareth. We didn't have a paved road, and in the winter, actually, my village will be disconnected from the world, because it's in a valley where there's agriculture, and it's the kind of soil that really becomes very muddy. So cars and trucks and the like, you can't travel basically. So, you know, growing up certainly was very apparent to me, very obvious, very, you know, the contrast between what the Jewish citizens of Israel have and what Palestinian citizens of Israel have the gap is way, way big.
And that's been going on since the Nakba in 1948. 47, 48, right?
Certainly. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you look at the history, once Israel was created, the Palestinian population inside Israel was put under military rule. We're citizens, but we're under military rule, meaning that if you need to travel to go to Haifa, like my father needed to go to Haifa to work and, earn living and feed the family, he would need to have a permit from the military commander for that area to be able to travel.
Right.
That's the kind of conditions that the Palestinian community lived under until 1966.
Right. What happened in 1966?
I don't know exactly how this constellation happens, but 1966, I guess the military rule was uplifted. And funny enough that 1967 came, and then the military rule that already was established inside Israel was the system transformed to manage the population in the West Bank and Gaza.
Is that right?
Which is interesting in many ways, but that's the way. I mean, if you look at writers like Alan Pape with Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, or other Rashid Khalidi, the 100 Years' War. I mean, that's part of the way the management of the Palestinian population in the land.
It's interesting that you mentioned your father having to leave home to go and work, either in Israel or, I guess, outside of where your village was.
Yeah.
And a colleague of mine at NYU, Andrew Ross, released a book a few years ago now, 4 or 5 years perhaps, called The Stone Men. And the subtitle is quite instructive, The Palestinians Who Built Israel. And the idea is that the labour of Palestinians, the real work that's been done to literally brick upon brick to build and construct the houses and the cities and the roads and so on, was probably low-cost labour that came from the exploitation of your people.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because a large segment of the Palestinian community inside Israel are laborers in construction and other services that most Jewish Israelis don't want to do. They call it either in Hebrew avodah shahara or avodah Aravit, like means with the labor of Arabs, or black labor kind of thing. And I worked in construction for a couple of years before college to save money, certainly. But the thing is that one of the things that we noticed that the Palestinian community was used for labor. So agriculture is not very profitable because it's very expensive to grow the crops, and certainly we don't get subsidy from the ministry like kibbutzim and mushavim get. So basically you become just a laborer in the market, and that's good for the Israeli economy, certainly.
Yeah. One of the points of this program, not only this program, but Boston Media Theory generally, is to provide people with information that they wouldn't otherwise have. And I think it's useful just to hear you talk about your experiences, because it seems to me that we often have been denied the voices of Palestinian people. And I'm wondering whether or not, just in terms of public knowledge about the experience of Palestine and Palestinians, that there is in fact a shortage of information, that there has been a kind of limit to what we know about the history of Palestine and Palestinian people.
Wow, that's a big topic. And certainly in the West, in Europe and the United States, there has been a dominant narrative for decades.
Right.
Let's say 70 or 80 decades, 7 or 8 decades, 70 or 80 years, where the narrative of the Israeli or the Zionist movement initially, and then the Israeli state have been dominant of how events transpire in the Middle East. in Palestine, in the Middle East, and what to highlight and what to either cover or omit. And when you talk to people here, it's just they're not exposed at all to the Palestinian narrative. Certainly, Israel as a state enjoys a great deal of support from Western governments. I mean, it was created by Western government. You know, the Balfour Declaration, 1917. His Majesty the King, George V, I guess.
One of those Georges, anyway.
Yeah, but I think he was George V. You know, had the Balfour Declaration, and if you think about it, 1917, Britain was not in charge. The Ottoman Empire or Turkey was still in charge then.
No.
So he already gave that declaration to a place where even militarily you don't control, not alone you own, you don't control. So that gives you an idea as what we're talking about. And certainly your point about having little or scarce information about the Palestinian narrative, that has been my experience since I came here to this country. And even if you look at the media now, where is, you know, plenty of resources, what the mainstream media really focuses on is the presentation of the Israeli point of view, and to much less degree the point of view of Palestinian. If you, I mean, there is some research now that has been done even for the last events of since October 7th. And if you look how many people have been invited for interviews in the major channels, you know, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, you would find maybe, I just would encourage anybody to listen again to an episode that was aired the beginning of March on NPR, on the media.
Oh, yeah.
And it talks about that particular issue, the coverage.
Right.
So, if
Which
you
is a good sign, right? It's, that the conversation is starting to emerge of a critique of the media.
Absolutely, it's absolutely a good sign that at least people are talking about it. But the major media outlets are very slow to catch up and at least be even-handed. We're not asking for bias. Just be even-handed or present at least a more thorough, you know, balanced, inclusive picture. I mean, I could you know, cite you some numbers if you like about, you know, that program, and, you know, it has been researched.
Sure.
You know, they looked at and they saw like there was 120 interviews, major interviews about the situation in Gaza. Or I think 140. 120 of them was with American officials, and the 120 American officials was, you know, the Blinken and the Sullivan and different people.
American government.
American
officials.
government, and they represented basically the Israeli government view. Okay, let's put that aside. Out of the other 20, there were, I think, probably 10 or 15 Israelis, or 10 Israelis, and 9 other, you know, other experts in the field, and 1 Palestinian. During all of this, 1 Palestinian who was interviewed, who was the Palestinian representative in the UK, was interviewed. So that just gives you a taste. And I can go on and on with other areas of, you know, how the media is biased really with the coverage.
Would it be possible, and there's been a long-standing debate within the US Academy in Media Studies, Communication Studies, but also more generally about the fourth estate in the United States, the role of the media in providing information to the public so they can make their minds up. And of course it was Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman who made the significant contribution there in proposing that kind of analysis way back in 1988. But the point seems to me to be important to understand not only that numerically there's a very small number, almost a non-existent number of Palestinian voices in the mainstream media, but that there is so little information flow that would allow the majority of the US population to actually make some sort of decision about what they think of the situation. And so what we have is an unusual situation now where there's been a significant turn or shift in public opinion, but it's not that it seems to be as a result of mainstream media, but of a whole world of alternative media that's been resisting, as you suggested, the dominant narrative. How do you see this kind of quite remarkable development of new media, or what used to be called alternative media? Now I think it's generally referred to as independent media. How important is that in the current situation?
I think it's very, very important, and I think you see that the more widespread solidarity with Palestinians nowadays within the public, Josh Mo on the street, who is not necessarily an activist, is able to see what's going on and make a decision, and and be maybe a sympathizer or maybe a little critical of the Israeli government plans and actions in Gaza, and that's an important source of information for people, and that maybe to a large extent has been the reason why many people are voicing and expressing their solidarity with the Palestinians. Because if you're going to rely on the mainstream media, the picture will not be as such. And I think in the mainstream media, some journalists even are speaking up against their own management, because I think it seems that it's the management who's trying to control the narrative. As an example, not too long ago in The Guardian, there was an article about CNN journalists saying that the directives that we have and the policies that we have in place are not only biased, but biased to the extent that are really harming people. Because we are not broadcasting, we are not reporting the real events. And that goes also to the other layers of how you report and what you report. What I mean by that is that you report in a way that when you report about the Israelis, they are massacred, they are killed, burned, and when you report about the Palestinians, they died, they perished, something like that. That is
right.
Is
different values in
different
in the
values,
language.
and also different. It has an emotional weight to it.
Right.
When you talk in such a language for one group that have been, I'm not saying that anybody should be killed, not at all. I mean, anybody who is losing their life, being that Palestinian, Israeli, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, it doesn't matter in terms of your affiliation, really. You're a human being, and you should not, be killed needlessly. It doesn't matter who you are. So, yeah, I mean, the media has been really atrocious in the way they covered and continue to cover, and I'm talking about those major outlets that, they consider themselves to be the, the journalists who report, the news in a truthful manner, but there's no truth to it, honestly, and I watch all of them.
And this goes to fundamental principles of journalistic ethics. It's supposed to pursue the truth, which means the good and the bad, and what might or might not agree or support or reinforce the US government point of view. We've got 5 minutes left, and I want to quickly ask you this, and it's not really fair to ask you this, but how do you respond to the sense that criticism of this kind of coverage and even criticism of the State of Israel is anti-Semitic? I know it's unfair to ask you this with 5 minutes left to go, but how do you think we should try and work through that?
Well, I mean, certainly I totally understand history of anti-Semitism and how anti-Semitism actually is a creation of Europe. The first incident that I'm aware of in the recent history was in 1290 when Edward I kicked all the Jews out of England.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the French did the same, and I think the Portuguese did the same year or 100 or 150 years later, and then you have the anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe. So anti-Semitism existed and continued to exist in many ways and forms. We need to distinguish between people, the Jewish people, the Native American people, the indigenous people of Australia, as people who deserve every right to have self-determination and to have human rights and dignity, and a state, a country, a policy, a political system. And if we are not allowed to criticize the political system, our democracy in jeopardy. And that's what it happens. Like when you have a fascist governments in Europe, that the freedom of the press is really curtailed, and you can't really report what's going on, then we have a problem. And we have to really be very shrewd and smart about conflicting Zionism with Judaism. They're not the same.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, the Zionist movement was a secular movement to start with. And Ben Gurion made a pact with the religious rabbis that they will run the affairs of the civil laws kind of thing of marriage and divorce and stuff until now. Right. You can't, a Jewish person cannot marry a goy, foreigner, not Jewish, in the state of Israel. You have to leave the country to get married and come back.
Still the case?
It's still the case.
Incredible.
So I think we need to really be very aware that criticizing a state, a political system, is not criticizing the religious affiliation of those people. Everybody has a freedom to worship whatever you want. That's your business between you and your God, or between you and your power that you think that the power that you spiritually kind of attuned to. And I know there has been a push by the ADL, by many Jewish organizations to do that, because the purpose of that is to silence people who want to speak against the policies of the State of Israel.
Right.
And to me, those two are separate. I mean, so there are so many Jewish people who are really bold against this this mixing, confliction of Judaism and Zionism. They're two separate things.
Well, they are two separate things, and they seem to me to be the problem. The nature of the problem is that they've been conveniently mixed up in the political process by people who have a particular objective in making sure there's a mixture or confusion.
Not conveniently only, it has been a strategic, thoughtful process of doing that, because there are implications. Now, you can't boycott the State of Israel. In many states, it will be illegal for you to boycott the State of Israel, which is crazy, because I want to boycott the American government. That's my right. I want to boycott Coca-Cola. And I'm going to ask my neighbors to do the same. That's my political right of self-expression, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. It's a non-violent way. You boycott people.
Well, we can stop there because our time is up. And I think on the question of boycotts and on the question of how to manage the great challenges facing Palestinian people, we've got a lot more to say and a lot more to think about. And certainly we've got a lot of media to look at and to examine and to critique. So Hani Murad, I want to thank you very much for being here, for your comments and for your insights. And I want to say thanks to the viewers and to everybody for listening. That's it from me and from Boston Media Theory. Until next time, From me, Marcus Breen, keep on mediating.
Thank you for having me.